Right, I need to have a fucking clean up. Is that in the way? No, it's not. Let's move this. We're doing this one in reverse. I'm gonna have a little tidy up. I finished this job. A couple of little things that I've done that I don't normally show people, and what I've never done is show you cunts, or any cunts, exactly what happens in reverse, if that makes sense. Normally, you get to see me interfering with myself with tools, but you also see me encountering problems and then things that I do to get over the problems. And that can sometimes lead to other issues, and you know, this video is going to be the complete opposite way around, where you're going to see the finished product, apart from the trigger guard, because that, and that basically covers it. Now, I would like you guys' help on one little thing. I'm looking for grey or stealth grey or any kind of AEG grips and stocks, because I can get anything in stealth grey, but I want to have a kind of grey. I don't want to Cerakote the plastics. I think Cerakoted plastic looks a bit tatty. It looks cheap. I want the grey to be fucking grey coloured, right? And so because of that, I'm trying to find anywhere that I can get AEG grips that are not the ICS ones. I know Battle Axe makes them, blah, 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 but I want to be able to get them easily because I've got so many guns. I'm not really a tan gun person. I want grey, I like OD, I like black, I like, you know, all the variations of burnt bronze, I like fucking concrete, silver, stainless. I'm not really a tan kind of guy. So if you know of anywhere that has them in stock, please, you know, throw me a link in the comments, alright? One of my regular customers gave me a couple of AEGs to do. One of them, I built it out of all the expensive stuff. The other one, we used a base gun. And I used, again, the internals from this base gun, basically, this whole complete base gun. And we traded out the front end, so this entire front end, for, I'm going to say, it's not GMP, I'm going to say, do you know what? I don't know what make, I forget what make, but it's an M4A1 rail system right at the front. Just, it's the most generic M4A1 you'll ever fucking see. You'd have seen that recently. Now, externally, didn't need any of this stuff because the bits that we needed to fix and do the gun he wanted, he was going to buy a VFC and then spend £500 changing parts on the inside and outside. And I said, don't do that. Okay, we'll get one of these and then we'll get the guts out of this and then I'll try and use your retro arms shit and all that other stuff, and I will try and make that gun work for you. If it works, great. And then your classic army, which again you'll see over on Patreon, that one we'll gut and we'll put all these good parts in. I bet I explained that like shit. I bet I did. Basically, if you're going to have a VFC and you want to get your classic army repaired and make it kicking and screaming, dragged back into this year, the best thing to do is to try and get as many parts as you can from somewhere else. And the cheapest way to do that is to buy a complete donor gun. That way, anything that doesn't line up and doesn't work, we've got a spare of here by a different brand. So instead of buying a VFC, which is M4A1, and then changing out everything on the inside and some bits on the outside, I simply got this instead for 150, 200 quid less, spent 100 and something quid on a Garda receiver, and then all the guts from this went into the classic army, and overall, although the VFC would have been the same price, give or take, the whole thing's worked out a few hundred quid cheaper because we've used the donor gun. And obviously selling this receiver, and this front end was swapped with me for one of my front ends, selling the receiver and stock tube and grip to somebody else, then gets him some money back, it's a few hundred quid saved. Then somebody else gets to get a cheap deal on a gun that they want. In this case, the MK18. Hopefully that made more sense this time round, because the first one was talking like a cunt. Now, the only thing I haven't done, I'm waiting for a pin punch so I can get trigger guard out of there, and then that will go onto here, and then I think we're going to put some kind of CTR stock on here. Now, what I do when I finish a gun for people is I take it apart to check my work and look for any wear and tear. There's no sense doing that until you know the job is finished and you've taken the customer's money. Then, wham, you can take it apart and check it out. That's what I'm doing. That's what I do in 99% of cases. So first up, we're going to listen to how this thing sounds. This is a 7.4. Are we ready? Everything inside this receiver set is custom built to what the customer wants. And what he wants to do is run a 7.4. He wants to run it down his stock tube. It's a big 7.4, so it will last him a long time, but he's a hardcore MILSIM player. He is not interested in loads of rate of fire. He's not interested in spamming out rounds. He needs to know that when he pulls the trigger, the gun is going to work. And he's probably going to fire 100 rounds in, what, a day? So I've got some parts that are going to be perfect for him, that ordinarily wouldn't last quite as long, but for his purposes, they're going to be absolutely spotless and perfect, right? But here's how it performs so far. So, safe. Pair and clickers inside it. That's the slack. That's the brake. Semi. And bear in mind, 7.4. When I put videos on the Warhead channel, I put up a video of something like this on 7.4, and somebody just jumps in with, I've got a T238 motor, and I've got it in my standard gun, and it's much faster than that on 11.1. And it's like, right, well, try running your T238 on a fucking 7.4. See how long it lasts you, you know? There is no correct build and correct parts list for any gun. So another point of this video is to make you go, well, I want to buy this tier of upgrade, and then you can rethink and go, do I want to buy a tier of upgrade? I'll explain more in a second. Semi. There we go. Semi. And then burst. It's very snappy, very fast. And again, that is 7.4. Look. 7.4. You get it? 7.4. Alright? Buying a particular tier of upgrade parts is fucking stupid. And there's reasons for it. In a lot of cases, the standard barrel that comes inside your AEG probably won't be as good as an aftermarket barrel. But what's the point if you've got other issues elsewhere in the gun? What is the fucking point? Changing out your hop rubber to a promi and a nub promi and putting a promi barrel in something, you are going to get the same kind of performance, realistically, through the standard SEMA Platinum barrel, through the standard fucking, well, any barrel really, if you haven't tweaked the rest of it. You know, you might see a tiny increase. If you've got particularly shit hot rubber, you're going to see an improvement, but you are literally paying somebody an hour of time. In a lot of these shops' cases, you're paying for an hour of time where they just change a barrel and hot rubber and charge you fucking 40 quid for the experience, plus the parts. And you go, well, it doesn't mean the gun is going to last longer. It doesn't mean it's going to get better, especially when they don't even open the fucking gearbox. There are all kinds of things that need to be done to make sure everything works perfectly, basically. So, in this case, this is doing about 1.01 joule on a 3.2. Take the stock off, castle nut, twist, pull, there it is. It's off. You'll see my wiring here looks a little bit different. I've got that heat shrink on there because I have changed the loom. I have changed where the wires live. Normally, you've got the signal wire attached about here. And you can sometimes get it in there, but a lot of times you can't. Especially if the dude wants to change his fucking sling point or whatever, that's it. You could be fucked. So, what I've done is, I have stripped the wire back, I have removed the signal wire, you'll see where it is in a second, and then I've just recovered that, pushed it back together, recovered it. And that way, I definitely can keep that out the way, so that is not going to tear up his wires. It keeps everything out the way. Next. Like I said, there's always issues to run into when you're doing something. So I've solved every issue with this already. But this is, again, a bespoke, one-of-a-kind build. All I need to do now is get it apart. And I've made this really fucking tight. That no longer does anything. That is now inert. And the reason for that is this particular gearbox casing won't fit that part anyway. It won't quite engage. You can see where it is, one of my nozzles in there. Now, one of the first things I did, this is a very particular barrel. I have modified the entrance point of the barrel. I polished it all the way down. I have changed where the BB literally feeds in. Where the BB, if you get what, fuck it. I've changed those bits a little tiny bit, and inside here I've got a silverback 60-degree flat hop. Now they call it flat hop. It's not flat hop like you'd expect. It's more like Mr. Hop. When you combine this with a decent barrel and a well-fitted, customized barrel, and you combine it with something like a ZCI hop unit, you can really, really get the power up, and you can really, really, really keep it consistent. And it can really, really, really fucking throw some heavy ammo. Now, the same hop rubbers, they probably last about half the time that a normal maple leaf would. If you get a bad jam, it's gonna shred, whereas a maple leaf probably won't. And you get one chance to fit it properly. You get one chance. Because when you put it on, if it isn't sitting straight, you've got to take it off again. I promise you, you're going to tear out the patch. You're going to. And then you need new hop rubber. And that's the end of the conversation. So I only use these in particular cases because they are delicate. They are not for the faint-hearted. I'm not taking it apart for that reason. I have thread locked that pin. So I'm going to tap it out. There's your pin. There's your part. Now the power is a little bit high, and that's because with one of these you can get all that out nice and easy. As you can see, clean the threads, grease the threads, spring in correct way. There's also no metal inside, and you do get that on these. You've got a thing that is very sharp running on a thing that's very weak and very sharp, so it's just one of those things. I've changed out the screws in here. And this is where you get to see some of the weird shit that I do. Just because something's good doesn't mean you can't make it better. And in this case, as you can see, this is what I've done. There is the warhead motor. It's a Ronin, it's got one of my towers on it. You can see that I have put longer cables on here. I've opened up the channels because I'm using a much fatter cable and lots of heat shrink. So that, I mean, I don't get these falling off anyway. Oh, mine just fell off. No, they fucking didn't. You weren't careful is what happened. So those aren't coming off, they're fine. I have also done the pinion. Now check this out. As far as I'm aware, G&G are the only people that do this. I have tapered all the way around. If you look at G&G motors, they have it as standard. This is G&G, as you can see. I have basically copied what they have done. Might be a little bit hard to tell because there's a little bit of white grease on here. But I have taken my own pinion and I've removed material and just tapered the bottom out, flanged it, whatever you want to call it, so that when it engages with the gear, again, I'm going to grab a random gear. We'll do a G&G one because this is my favourite design of bevel gear, but not many people do it. That is the perfect width to sit there, but also, if you pair it with a completely normal looking bevel gear, if that lines up a bit too deep, it could be engaging funny with the outside edges. Here's one that is a prime example. Look at the edges and how chewed they are. You can't see it from straight down, but when you go side on, if you can see that, it is all chewed. Not on the edges here, not on there, but on the sides. And the reason for that is because these sharp corners are engaging in a just slightly off. And that's why sometimes, no matter how hard you shim something, it doesn't sound right. And there's, with a normal skill set, and you guys sitting at home and techs who don't know what the fuck they're doing, they would see this as an issue and go, well, I have to change all the gears of the motor. Or just, in many cases, a fucking site techs and whatever, I'll just leave it like this and say it's the best it's going to be. With this method, this is not going to bite on anything, whether it's the edge of this or the inside of the gearbox casing, and that's why I've done it. Obviously, my motor tower, this is the type that I put in customer builds. This is the steel bearing type, stainless steel bearing, shimmed under and above the tower. Now, something else to look out for. A lot of times the gearbox cases, and everyone whinges about this, they want to make this as super tight around the tower as possible, but you can't, it can be difficult. I mean, I've got a good, I reckon, 2 mil of play on that, and of course it's not ideal. So people try and make it as tight as they can inside there. And I pose this question to you. Fucking why? Especially when, if you look inside here, once the angle is lined up correctly from the base plate, pushing it directly forward, I've got probably 0.3 of a millimetre of play in that direction. I literally do not need to make that super tight inside there. I don't need to. And also, as long as that is biting and holding it in the right place, you shouldn't get a lot of turn, but you can see here how deep it does want to push it. And again, this is, they try and make everything as generic as possible, so it fits everything. In an ideal world, these end caps will be longer, but we're not in an ideal world because that will only fit some things. It will only really work with this here, because you can see how deep I've got that screwed in. You can see that that is not sitting within that hole, so it is only grabbing by that tiny corner there. And these are little things you need to look for. These are things no one goes over. They don't mention it to you. They talk to you about how to do the exact shimming job, which I showed you in my last video. That's fuck, isn't it? There's no perfect shimming job. It doesn't exist. So that is a very important thing. This has to go deeper than this can grab it. So I have to make sure there is a little tiny bit of play and it's being held in the right way in the right place. Again, ideal world. These end caps could be bigger, but we're not in an ideal world. If you start making things that are only for this particular grip of this brand of this gun, these motors will double in price. Of course they will. They're already expensive. We shall go deeper. You'll see grease around here. That's where I've got excess grease, because obviously this is a brand new fresh build. It's probably done about 200 rounds, 300 rounds, just where I'm testing and making and, you know. So it's going to flick out the grease everywhere. This is why, when you first get your gun back from any tech, if they've done even the best job they can, there might be a couple of power fluctuations, because that is the big thing. I could put as little grease in here as possible, and when you get the gun back, you'll get 1 FPS, 2 FPS, maybe 3 FPS of variation. But to keep the gun running longer without servicing it, you need to put slightly more grease on there in the right places, and it's going to flick out. It's going to go to places. You can see it's not on there, but it is managing to flick out onto there. Now, believe it or not, even 10 FPS of variance over the course of 10 shots, it might be 305 FPS on a .25, it could be 295. That's a big variance, but it doesn't mean there's an air seal problem. It could be 1,000 things, and you can sort that out. But the most important thing to remember is to bring that in tighter, you have to bring everything in the gun a bit tighter, which costs more money and less grease. And the big problem I have with making it that perfect is that in the 28 years I've been doing this now, you're not going to notice any difference in performance. You'd have to be in a fucking wind tunnel. You ain't going to notice. So don't worry about 10 FPS of variance. I mean, I can't send something out with 10 FPS of variance. Not when it's a custom build like this, I can't do it. But if you've got 10 FPS of variance, it really isn't a big deal. Like, if the BBs are going 295, 305, 295, 305, that's a problem. But if it's going 302, 303, 300, 303, 298, 301, don't worry. Don't worry. You will not see any difference in your flight path you would literally have to be in a wind tunnel, okay? You're going to get a much worse variation if one of the fat cunts farts in the fucking game zone, alright? Seriously, don't worry about it. Something else I do, I like to put my pins in the wrong way. I don't know why, it's just something I do. There are scratches here. Not a lot I can do about that really, because inside here is where I've got the retaining clip. And it's very fucking tight. I want to try and knock the pin through, but I don't think it will go. Don't think it's going to go. Get the clip, pull it out. And this is why I've got scratches. There it comes. And then don't drop it in your gearbox. I don't need to use that because I've built everything, so that's going to hold in place. Like, I don't need it, but it's there anyway. So there's that pin. And then on this side, it is the opposite way around. And the reason it's the opposite way around is so that I remember it's the opposite way around. That sounds so stupid, but sod's law is you do them the opposite way around by mistake, so you may as well make sure to put them in the opposite way around. You always remember. Okay, there's the gearbox. I've had to do a couple of little mods to this just to make it go. I've removed that little piece there so it fits inside the receiver. This is the E&C type casing, and I really, really do rate it, and I had one lying here cheap, and that's why I used it. Radius, those corners there, and those corners there. This had a tiny bit of flash metal, which I removed here. In an ideal world, I could just, you know, get all the marks off of it, but I'm not going to because, they have just literally painted this in the factory, so it doesn't matter. Look there. That's where I drill the hole through, this way down, zip, and then I run a grub screw in, thread lock it, and then I buzz it completely away. So that is smooth as smooth, and the reason for that is it keeps all the wires out the way. What you don't want to do when you're dropping your floor pin through, this one's got a clicker in, so it won't actually touch the magnet hold on the trigger, because there is no magnet hold on the trigger, which you do find with parent hybrids. The wires don't accidentally drift across here because they are now in place underneath that screw. And it cannot come out. I've also used EZO bearings in this one because of what the guy wants to use it for. And he had the budget to do so. It's not something I say is required in 99% of builds, but in this case, it's going to serve a purpose, therefore we're doing it. People also ask if I still fuck with people in my videos and put little lies in there. I still put a lie in videos, I like to do that, but I also do things that are very frustrating, and when you notice I've done it, you either laugh or you get very pissed off. These are steel Torx screws. I do prefer Torx. I've picked a cylinder, and I've managed to get cylinders that are very slightly too big for some gearbox cases, which really pissed me off. And then I realised actually in some guns, like M14s, certain M14s, the cylinder is about 2mm too small, and it moves, and it's annoying. So I've got these ones that are a little bit tight, but very gently tapping, out you come. Again, we're keeping costs down as much as we can, affording other things by cutting costs of different things. With this gearbox casing, I didn't need to use a very, very, very hefty cylinder head. So I've gone to my bits box and pulled out the G&G G2 type because they're pretty good. Where's my blade? Where's my blade? There it is. Go. Cunt off. So now we're going to look for damage. Actual damage, not metal on metal rubbing, where a black part has turned slightly grey or silver, because that's inevitable. These are 14:1 gears. They are 2 pieces and 3 pins. One of those pins being the actual axle. And if I show you exactly where I've short stroked, I've gone down to 11 teeth. Because of its barrel length, that's all I need. And you can see how mint that job is. When you're doing that as well, you want to make sure that your piston is not riding on here. Because that can happen. In this case, well, in this casing, no joke.
Ha ha, very funny, motherfucker.
That doesn't happen, so I didn't need to remove anything from there, but you can see where I have removed material from here. And if I were to go and clean that off very slightly, you can see what an exceptionally neat job I've done. I've also, from this side, taken away 3 teeth from here. The reason I went with 3 is because I want to lighten the piston up a little tiny bit, but if I had calculated wrong, and I've accidentally taken too many teeth off of here, and I can't use that gear set, which can happen. You take too many off one side rather than the other. In some builds, you can take a couple off the release, some off the pickup. It depends on how that gearbox wants to work and the parts you're using, the speed of the motor, the battery, all that shit. So I've only taken 3 off, just in case I have to change the gear set. I'd have to change a piston as well. And having 3 off lightens it very slightly, and it's fine. Again, if I give that a little spray, no damage, everything mint. One of my fat boy piston heads, because between a normal size cylinder head, my wide boy nozzle, that's how much of an air seal there is. It's good. It's a good air seal. We're also going to pull the nozzle forward and spin it like that to check the air seal, and alright, so there's that. I've cut the tappet plate just here because I want to make sure that this, when it's about to pick up, it's already pulling this back. But what I don't want to have happen is the natural resting point of the tappet plate means that I cannot get that all the way forward. That's another issue that I didn't really look for, and over the past 4 or 5 years I've gone, oh fuck yeah, maybe that's it. Because if this is being held back, even by a fraction, because this has got a very slim axle, but some gear sets have a fucking huge axle. He says struggling to find a fucking example. That's a 18 to 1 ZCI, and you can see that is a lot fatter than that one, which means this isn't going to be all the way forward and home, it's going to be back by just a fraction. And if you've got that gap there, that's a problem, because now you've got air likely leaking around outside your nozzle. That matters. It has to be all the way forward. A 200+% tappet spring and a little bit of heat shrink just to dampen it, because it's fatter and thicker and it does ring a little bit when it touches on there. As you can see, I cut the fin as well, because it will do you no harm to cut the fin down, provided you don't cut too much off. And it can only have good results. If other people will say that's wrong, fuck them. So let me re-grease that while I'm here. Same for this one. Okay, the clicker, the amount of people, it doesn't fit ENC, doesn't it? It just drops in, look at that. This is not a stainless gear. This was actually black. And again, one of the reasons I had to remove corners from here, and you can see a little bit on this, there's no damage or major wear, it's just it's turned a little tiny bit silver on the edges. There's no dents, it's just the black finishing to the gear. It just wasn't sitting right. And that is because ENC, Spetner, anyone use the ENC gearbox casing basically, their own gears that they use are normally slightly slimmer, and the angle on this is slightly different. So what I've had to do with this one, and again I'll wipe it down so I can show you, See that? I've had to remove about 0.6 of a millimetre down. It's about 0.3 of a millimetre of the actual main part of the gear, but also around here, which means it has to go onto the machine and I cannot touch the axle itself. And that means that I was able to move this up very slightly. And because I'm not using Airsoft EZO bearings, I just went to a bearing company and went, I need the toughest fucking EZO types you've got, seriously. And they are a bit fatter because of it, which means I've got less room for shimming. That's where the EZOs are. They're still in place, they're still nice. Again, completely not required for most builds. In this case, I saved money on a couple of other bits, so I was able to put these in there, so he's going to get that nice quiet sound to his gun. And there is where you can see my screw. As you can see, it goes in very slightly at an angle, because I don't want it pointing down accidentally, because I don't want it to be pinched. I want this with a little bit of room, so I can squeeze in the signal wire and the battery terminal negative wire, and then have this very slightly over the top of it. And it gives slightly, when it's pointing up very slightly, I can just give a bit more room, just a little bit more room. Removed any burrs from that rail, and also inside there, exact same thing on this side. Removed any burrs, removed any burrs. Again, pointless doing this bit here and here, because nothing fucking touches it. If your piston can touch that, you're using the wrong piston. Wrong piston. So you don't need to polish all that shit out. It's only when you've got a burr, or if you think you might have a crack and you want to see if it is a crack, so you just polish it away. Here, you can now see where I ran the signal wire just underneath the anti-reversal latch, because that gives it more room for the motor to sit here. And I've removed the signal wire from back here. It would normally live, and now it lives there. And it sits perfectly in that gap. The signal wire cannot be pushed out of the way and into the gears, because the spring of the anti-reversal latch holds it in place. And you'll see where these gears, they do sit very high. Fucking shimming police are out again, look. Next, my wonderful clips. Boom. I'm looking for any damage to the teeth on the gears. There isn't any. Any damage to the piston. Is it biting too hard? Is it pulling it back at an angle and causing dents? It's not. Was there a good air seal? There was. Is there any debris inside the cylinder where things have just got in there? No, there isn't. So now I can reassemble. Now that I've done a few rounds through it, am I concerned that the tappet delayer is going to come off? Because some gearboxes require a tappet delayer whether you like it or not. I prefer the round ones that are brass, but they don't always fit, again, around the axle and the tappet cam. So in this case, I've gone with one of these ones. They cost, what, £1 each? So that's the easy thing. Thread lock in place, done. Okay, that's you. If this were a front wired gun, I'd be running both the wires out of this hole. It's not, so I'm not. Trigger. I've made sure that that screw is not going to interfere with the trigger itself. And it's not. Clicker. Oh no, it doesn't fit. And then another clip. Because I don't want this fucking... I want to get this back together in one hit. I want this to be as little editing time as possible. This little beauty here. Forward it goes, forward it goes, forward it goes. And the final thing that I check, when that is perfectly straight, is it resting or pressing down on the sector gear? It's not. I'm happy with that. There's going to be some contact, I'm sure, but it's not pressing. And because the power is consistent and it is slightly higher than I'd expect from the spring I'm using, considering there's fucking 5 teeth off the sector gear, I'd be using like an M125 normally. But because of the setup I've used with that particular hot rubber, with that particular barrel, with this particular nozzle, and this, I'm using an M115. And I'm still getting slightly too high power, which is good. I like that. One more clip. And that. Holds that down, like that. And I can walk away. It's not going to go anywhere. I don't think I need to add any more grease. I think I'm happy with the amount I've got. The final thing is the Tappet cam or the sector delayer chip touching on here. Sometimes it can hit there or it can hit there. In this case, I have not had to remove any material. Sometimes you do. 1, 2, 3. Make sure I'm not trapping any wires. I am not. That's out. Done. No trap wires. No trap wires. No trap wires. Something I didn't mention, removing the pegs off the top half of the gearbox casing, which doesn't put any extra pressure on the wires, because normally it's only pressing on 2 wires. Now there's equivocally 3 and they could be fatter. So I only need 1 screw to check that. It's fine. I want the slightly longer one at the front. I have my reasons. Now I want to clean it all off. The official seal of disapproval. And back together we go. Look for any dust and debris that I've got in here while I was building it. There is none. Make sure the gearbox lines up. And again, if I'm doing this properly, I better tell you the proper stuff. That pin first, okay? And I'm going to go in this way because this is the natural way that I'd be putting the gearbox in with the fire selector about there. So to have to flip it over and put the pin through, pain in the arse, and I've always put it in that way, like that. As you can see, it does just push through nicely because everything is out of the way. This pin, the rear body pin, goes through to there. I don't technically need to put the spring back on because that is definitely going to hold once the grip is on here. That's not going to go anywhere. And to be fair, I might leave it off just in case. Next, weird one. I'll put the spring in. Done. Next, make sure these wires are still as low down as they're going to get, and they are. Trying not to scratch the tower. It's all good. Check the connectors, no grease on them or anything like that. More grease on the pinion. I'm going to put some on the spring as well. Obviously my tower cannot touch. I've got a very, very wide shim, and that now cannot possibly rub on here. Again, checking for any wires that are damaged. If you've torn the silicone around the wire, but you haven't damaged the wire itself, just cover it. Don't use electrical tape, it looks tatty. Although there's 4 screw holes in the grip, there's only 2 screw holes in the gearbox casing. Do not torque that down heavy, because if you then accidentally round out one of these screws, you can replace it. If you happen to round out the thread inside the gearbox casing, you're fucked. You've got to use a fatter screw. And part of having the gun serviced and whatever else is making sure these screws are held in place. Again, you can use a mild thread lock, but to get it out, you may still, even with mild stuff, have to get some heat in there. Yeah, you don't want that, because what else is in here? Wires, plastic grip, don't want that. In it goes. Make sure it can go all the way down. It can, you can see when it's all the way down, look, I've got almost no movement at all. There's definitely no like this, but there is a little bit like that, if that makes sense. Next, wires. Make sure you're holding the wires. This goes for battery plugging in and unplugging as well. Don't just pull it. Hold both sides and press in, hold both sides and pull out. And then that just sits in there. Wire management in some guns, as Fonzie found out the other day, can be a complete dick, because you don't know you've made a mistake until you've made a mistake. And with the wire method like that, You see how much extra room I've got? Some people haven't got the budget to pay me to do these little things. If I'm feeling particularly generous, I might do it. Now the very frustrating part. I changed the screws out because the SEMA and the ENC grips, they're self-tapping, not a big fan. And they use the most bizarre size of Torx head. Again, almost no torque. That's it. Clip on. This one doesn't actually need the clip in place. What this normally does is hold the upper receiver just on there nicely. And there. What I've also done inside this gun, because I didn't need to use the bolt hold open, I have put such a fucking spring in here. That is hefty. Really hefty. Most people would hate that. Before I go any further, we're going to test it. Make sure the gun's on safe. 7.4. You may have to adjust your motor height in and out again. You never know. This might sound crap again, even though it shouldn't. Everything's the same. Beautiful. There's no active brake, no pre-cocking. I'm not using any of the fucking features. None of the features. I'm using it because it is the most reliable light gate system. Combined Perrin hybrid with Warhead motors, just fucking beautiful. As you can see, that pin is not anywhere near falling out, so I'm not going to use that at all. It's not required. Because I'm supplying the receiver, as it were, I can decide if that's in there or not, and then I might lose one. Somebody else has already supplied a gun, he wants that clip in there. Okay, in this case, I don't need to worry. Drop that in. Again, tap, tap, taparoo. I'm not going to apply any more thread lock, it's not required. I will do the trigger guard later on. See you in there. This is very tight, because obviously it's tight. And there's one final thing I'm going to do. That hopefully means that he can't tear the wires up and whatever else when his battery goes in and out. I hope. That is not something I do with every build. I know this person, and I don't want him to be an oaf with the thing that I did. Plug her in. Semi. Fucking lovely. 3-shot burst. What more could you ask for, see? Yeah. Again, I don't know what fucking stock he wants, but there we are. Should give it a chrono. .02. 1 joule. This is the FPS. 260 on a 3.2. 260.4. 260. 261, 260.6, 259.6. So 3 FPS of variance, give or take. And then rounds per second of variance on 7. So if this is doing 3-round burst and feeding properly, I'd expect that to go to about 0.95 joule, I reckon, and that should go to 10. Ready? Nope, stay where it was. 1 joule. And that, kids, is how it's fucking done.